Get out! Professor Katherine Sterling's voice cracked like a whip across the lecture hall. She pointed at the door, her finger trembling with rage. Don't you dare pretend you understand this, janitor! 53-year-old Marcus Thompson stood frozen, his mop dripping dirty water onto the floor. 30 graduate students watched, some smirking, others looking away in embarrassment. But Marcus didn't leave. Instead, he stepped closer to the blackboard covered in equations that had stumped Sterling for weeks. There's an error in your third line, Professor. The room went dead silent. What happens when the person you've dismissed your entire career turns out to be smarter than you? Comment below what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The chalk dust hung in the air like a verdict waiting to be delivered. Katherine Sterling had built her entire life on being the smartest person in every room she entered. Harvard undergraduate, MIT doctorate, Cambridge fellowship. At 41 years old, she was the youngest tenured professor in Whitmore University's mathematics department, and she never let anyone forget it. I said get out. Her voice dropped lower, this time more dangerous. Now. Marcus Thompson didn't move. His hands stayed wrapped around the mop handle, knuckles whitening. 53 years of life had taught him when to walk away from a fight. But something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the exhaustion. 3 jobs, 16-hour days. His wife's medical bills stacking up like autumn leaves. Maybe it was the equation on the board, a problem he recognized from a lifetime ago, from a version of himself that had been buried so deep he'd almost forgotten it existed. Or maybe he was just tired of being invisible. Professor Sterling, he said quietly, I mean no disrespect. But that third line you've confused the eigenvalue decomposition. The matrix isn't symmetric. A student in the front row laughed out loud. Derek Chen, Sterling's star pupil, the one who drove a BMW and wore watches that cost more than Marcus made in 3 months. Did the janitor just try to correct a Harvard PhD? Derek turned to his classmates. Someone call security. The help is having a mental breakdown. More laughter rippled through the room. Sterling's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Thompson, isn't it? She walked toward him slowly, heels clicking against the floor like a countdown. I've seen you around campus, emptying trash cans, mopping floors. Tell me what exactly qualifies you to comment on advanced mathematical topology. Marcus felt the heat rising in his chest. 30 years ago, he would have answered differently. 30 years ago, he had credentials of his own. But that was before life had other plans. I'm just saying what I see, Professor. What you see? Sterling laughed, a sharp sound that echoed off the walls. What you see is symbols you can't possibly comprehend. This isn't arithmetic, Mr. Thompson. This isn't balancing a checkbook or counting your tips. This is mathematics at its highest level, something that requires years of rigorous training. She stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could smell her expensive perfume. Do you know what separates people like me from people like you? Education, discipline, the ability to dedicate one's life to intellectual pursuit instead of... She gestured at his mop. Whatever this is. The students were filming now. Marcus could see the phone screens glowing in the darkness of the lecture hall. By tomorrow, this would be all over social media. The janitor who tried to correct the professor. Another viral moment of public humiliation. He should have walked away. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, push his cart out the door, and forget this ever happened. Instead, Marcus set down his mop. May I? He nodded toward the blackboard. Sterling's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me. The equation. May I show you what I mean? Derek Chen was already on his feet. Professor, you can't be serious. This is a graduate seminar, not a comedy show. But something flickered in Sterling's eyes. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe just the anticipation of a more spectacular humiliation. By all means, Mr. Thompson. She stepped aside with an exaggerated bow. Enlighten us. Marcus walked to the blackboard. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. It had been 27 years since he'd held a piece of chalk. 27 years since he'd stood in front of an equation and felt that familiar electricity in his fingers. He picked up the chalk. It felt foreign and familiar all at once, like shaking hands with a ghost. "Here," he said, pointing to the third line. "You've assumed the matrix A is symmetric, which would allow for orthogonal diagonalization. But if you look at your original formulation..." He began writing. The symbols flowed from his hand like water from a broken dam. All the mathematics he'd buried, all the knowledge he'd locked away, pouring out onto the blackboard. The matrix is actually skew-symmetric, which means your eigenvalues are purely imaginary, not real. The entire proof structure needs to be rebuilt from here. He wrote for 3 minutes straight. When he finally set down the chalk, his hand was shaking. The lecture hall was silent. Sterling stared at the blackboard. Her face had gone pale, the confident smile frozen in place like a mask that no longer fit. "That's..." She cleared her throat. "That's not..." "It's correct, Professor." Dr. William Chen, no relation to Derek, had been observing from the back of the room. The elderly Professor Emeritus leaned forward in his seat, his eyes fixed on Marcus's work. "Every step is mathematically sound. In fact..." He adjusted his glasses. "This approach is rather elegant." Sterling spun around. "William, don't be ridiculous. He's a janitor." "He's a janitor who just solved a problem you've been stuck on for 2 weeks." Dr. Chen stood slowly, his joints creaking with age. "I've been watching you struggle with this proof in faculty meetings, Katherine. This man just fixed it in 3 minutes." The students were murmuring now, the tone shifting from mockery to something else. Confusion. Disbelief. A few of them were actually looking at Marcus with something approaching respect. Sterling's composure cracked. Just for a moment, but Marcus saw it, the flash of fear beneath the arrogance, the desperate scramble of someone whose entire worldview was being challenged. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Who are you really?" Marcus picked up his mop. "I'm the night janitor, Professor. Building 7. Building 12 in the Science Center. 6 to 2 Monday through Friday." "That's not what I meant, and you know it." "It's all I am now." He turned toward his cart. "Have a good evening." "Wait." Something in her voice stopped him. It wasn't a command this time. It was almost a question. "That technique you used, the skew-symmetric decomposition, that's not standard curriculum. That's research-level methodology. Where did you learn that?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The lecture hall held its breath. Another life, Professor. A long time ago. He pushed his cart toward the door. "This isn't over," Sterling called after him. "I want to know who you are. I want to know how you know what you know." Marcus didn't turn around. "Some doors are better left closed, Professor. Trust me on that." The door swung shut behind him, leaving Katherine Sterling standing in front of a blackboard full of equations that a janitor had just mastered. The story spread like wildfire. By morning, Marcus Thompson was the most talked-about person at Whitmore University. The videos from the lecture hall had accumulated over 200,000 views overnight. Janitor Genius was trending on Twitter. Local news stations were calling the university asking for interviews. Marcus ignored all of it. He clocked in at 6, emptied the trash in the administration building, mopped the floors in the library, and tried to pretend that nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Students who had never looked at him twice were suddenly stopping him in hallways. "Hey, you're the guy from the video, right? Dude, that was insane. Can you help me with my calculus homework?" Faculty members whispered as he passed. Some looked at him with newfound curiosity. Others with barely disguised resentment, as if his display of intelligence had somehow diminished their own. And then there was Sterling. She found him in the basement of the Science Center restocking supply closets. She was alone this time, no students to perform, for no audience to impress. "We need to talk," she said. Marcus didn't look up from his inventory sheet. I'm working, Professor. This is more important than your work. Not to me, it isn't. Sterling stepped into the supply closet, blocking his path. Up close, without the shield of her academic authority, she looked different. Younger somehow. More uncertain. I spent all night going over your proof, she said. It's not just correct. It's better than anything I could have come up with. The elegance of your approach, the intuition behind your choices, that's not something you learn from textbooks. That's instinct. That's talent. Marcus finally looked at her. What do you want, Professor? I want to know who you are. The real story. Not the janitor act. It's not an act. This is my life. But it wasn't always your life, was it? Sterling leaned against a shelf of cleaning supplies. I did some research. Marcus Thompson, 53 years old, no criminal record, no academic publications, no trace of you in any university database. It's like you appeared out of thin air. Maybe I did. That's not possible, and we both know it. Her voice softened. Look, I owe you an apology. What I said last night, how I treated you, it was cruel. I made assumptions based on your job, your appearance, your... She gestured vaguely. Your circumstances. I was wrong. Marcus studied her face. She seemed sincere, but he'd learned long ago not to trust sincerity from people who had power over him. Is this about the apology? Or is this about the Euler challenge? Sterling blinked. How do you know about that? I clean the mathematics department every night, Professor. I've seen the posters. I've heard the faculty talk. $50,000 and automatic PhD admission to any participating university. Pretty big stakes. It's the most prestigious mathematics competition in the country. I'm the head judge this year. Congratulations. And I want you to enter. Marcus laughed. It was a genuine laugh, the first one he'd allowed himself in months. You've got to be kidding me. I'm completely serious. 12 hours ago you called me a janitor who couldn't comprehend basic arithmetic. Now you want me to compete against PhD candidates from Harvard and MIT? 12 hours ago I was wrong. Sterling's jaw tightened. I'm trying to make this right. You have talent, real talent. Talent that deserves to be recognized. The Euler challenge could change your life. Marcus shook his head. My life doesn't need changing, Professor. Everyone's life needs changing. That's what growth is. Easy for you to say. You've got tenure, a corner office, and a salary that could buy my house twice over. I've got 3 jobs, a wife with stage 3 cancer, and a stack of medical bills that keeps me up at night. Growth is a luxury I can't afford. The words hung in the air between them. Sterling's expression shifted from determination to something softer. Guilt, maybe, or recognition. I didn't know, she said quietly. Why would you? People like you don't see people like me. We're furniture, background noise. We exist to make your world function, but you never have to think about us. Sterling was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. My father was a janitor. Marcus looked up sharply. 30 years at a middle school in Ohio, she continued. He worked nights so he could be home when my sister and I got back from school. He never missed a parent-teacher conference, never missed a recital, never missed a game. And you know what I remember most about him? Marcus didn't answer. I remember being ashamed. When other kids talked about what their fathers did, doctors, lawyers, engineers, I would lie. I told them he worked in building maintenance, which sounded fancier than janitor. I thought if I just worked hard enough, got smart enough, achieved enough, I could erase where I came from. She laughed bitterly. And now here I am treating someone exactly the way I was afraid people would treat my father. The universe has a sick sense of humor. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of understanding. What happened to him? He asked. Heart attack. 12 years ago. He never saw me get tenure. Never saw me become department head. All those achievements I was so desperate to collect, and he wasn't there to see any of them. Sterling's voice cracked. I think that's why I hold on to them so tightly. If I let go, if I admit they don't mean as much as I pretend they do, then what was it all for? The supply closet felt smaller now, the distance between them shrinking. Enter the competition, Sterling said. Not for me, not to prove anything to me. Do it for yourself. Do it because you have a gift, and gifts like yours shouldn't be wasted pushing a mop. Marcus was quiet for a long time. He thought about his wife Linda lying in their bed at home, too weak to get up most days. He thought about the bills, $47,000, and climbing. He thought about the life he'd walked away from, the dreams he'd buried, the mathematician he used to be. Even if I wanted to, he said finally, I couldn't compete. The registration fee is $500. That's a month of groceries. I'll pay it. I don't take charity. It's not charity. It's an investment. Sterling pulled out her phone. I'll register you right now. Consider it my apology for last night. And if I lose, if I embarrass myself in front of the entire academic world, then you'll be exactly where you are now. Nothing lost. Marcus thought about it. The risk, the exposure, the possibility of failure on a stage he'd avoided for nearly 3 decades. But he also thought about the feeling of holding that chalk, the electricity in his fingers, the way the mathematics had flowed through him like it had never left. One condition, he said. Name it. When I compete, if I compete, you treat me like every other candidate. No special treatment, no pity. If I win, I earn it. If I lose, I earn that too. Sterling nodded slowly. Fair enough. And another thing. What? You were right about one thing last night. Marcus picked up his mop. I'm not just a janitor, but that doesn't mean being a janitor is something to be ashamed of. I've cleaned toilets and emptied trash cans for 15 years, and I've done it with dignity. Don't ever let me hear you use that word like an insult again. Sterling met his eyes. For the first time, she didn't look away. Deal, she said. She walked out of the supply closet, leaving Marcus alone with his cleaning supplies and the first spark of hope he'd felt in years. The registration announcement came 3 days later. Marcus was mopping the main hallway of the mathematics building when the email went out. Within minutes, his phone was buzzing with messages from numbers he didn't recognize. Is this the janitor from the video? Bro, you're actually competing. No way Whitmore let a cleaning staff member enter. This has to be fake. But it wasn't fake. Marcus Thompson's name was listed among the 14 candidates for the 87th Annual Euler Challenge. The only name without university affiliation. The only name followed by a blank space where academic credentials should be. The backlash was immediate. Derek Chen cornered him in the faculty break room. This is a joke, right? Some kind of publicity stunt Sterling cooked up to get attention for the competition. Marcus poured himself a cup of coffee. No joke. You can't be serious. Do you have any idea who you're competing against? Jennifer Walsh from MIT. She published 3 papers before she finished her undergraduate degree. Thomas Reeves from Harvard, his grandfather won the Fields Medal. These are the best young mathematicians in the country. Then I guess I'll have to do my best. Derek laughed. Your best is mopping floors and scrubbing toilets. That's your best. This competition is going to destroy you, and when it does, I want front row seats. Marcus took a sip of his coffee. Save me a seat then. I'll do better than that. Derek stepped closer, lowering his voice. I'm going to make sure everyone knows who you really are. A fraud, a fluke, a 53-year-old man who got lucky once and is about to learn that luck doesn't last. That's quite a speech. It's a promise. Derek smiled coldly. Welcome to the big leagues, janitor. Hope you brought thick skin. He walked away, leaving Marcus alone with his coffee and the weight of what he'd agreed to. That night, Marcus sat in his kitchen staring at a pile of mail he'd been avoiding for weeks. Credit card bills, medical invoices, a notice from the bank about missed mortgage payments. Linda was asleep in the next room. The cancer treatment was working, but slowly. Too slowly. Every day felt like borrowed time. "You're thinking too loud." Linda's voice floated in from the bedroom. "I can hear you worrying from here." Marcus smiled despite himself. 31 years of marriage, and she still knew him better than he knew himself. "Go back to sleep, honey. Come talk to me first." He walked into the bedroom. Linda was propped up on pillows, her face pale, but her eyes bright. Even after everything, the diagnosis, the treatments, the endless nights in hospital rooms, she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. "I did something today," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I know. The whole internet knows. My phone hasn't stopped buzzing." Linda reached for his hand. "The Euler Challenge, Marcus. That's a big deal. It's probably a mistake. Or it's exactly what you've been waiting for." She squeezed his fingers. 27 years, baby. 27 years of watching you hide who you really are. Do you know how hard that's been for me?" Marcus looked down. "I had to take care of us." "I know. And you did. You've been the best husband, the best provider, the best man I could have asked for. But there's a part of you that's been locked away since before we met. The part that solves equations in his head while he's mopping floors. The part that reads mathematics journals when he thinks I'm not looking. You notice that. Marcus, I've been married to you for 3 decades. I notice everything." Linda pulled him closer. "That professor was cruel to you. But she was also right. You have a gift, and maybe it's time to stop being afraid of it." "What if I fail?" "Then you fail, but at least you'll know." She smiled. "And I'll still be here either way. That's what we promised, remember, for better or worse, in sickness and health, through victories and defeats." Marcus leaned down and kissed her forehead. "What did I do to deserve you?" "Something good, apparently." Linda closed her eyes. "Now, let me sleep. You've got equations to solve and worlds to conquer." He sat with her until her breathing deepened into sleep. Then he walked back to the kitchen, cleared away the bills, and pulled out a worn notebook from underneath the pile. It was old. The pages were yellowed, the binding cracked. But the equations inside were still legible remnants of a life he'd left behind. Marcus opened to the first page and began to read. The preliminary round of the Euler Challenge was held 2 weeks later. The format was simple: 15 candidates, 3 elimination problems, 1 hour each. Solve all 3, and you advance to the semifinals. Fail any of them, and you went home. Sterling presided over the registration with professional detachment, her earlier vulnerability hidden behind a mask of academic authority. Whatever connection they'd shared in that supply closet, she wasn't showing it now. "Welcome to the 87th Annual Euler Challenge," she announced to the assembled candidates. "This competition represents the pinnacle of mathematical achievement. Only the most prepared, most disciplined, most talented will advance." Her eyes swept across the room, lingering just a moment on Marcus. "Let us begin." The first problem appeared on the screen. Marcus recognized it immediately, a classic optimization challenge with a twist that required unconventional thinking. Around him, the other candidates began scribbling furiously. Pencils scratched against paper. Calculators clicked. The sound of desperate concentration filled the room. Marcus picked up his pencil. For 27 years he had buried this part of himself. For 27 years he had told himself that being good at mathematics didn't matter anymore, that his life had taken a different path, that some doors were meant to stay closed. But as his hand moved across the paper, as the numbers and symbols flowed from somewhere deep inside him, Marcus Thompson remembered who he used to be, and he began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he could be that person again. The first problem took Marcus 11 minutes. He set down his pencil and looked up at the clock on the wall. 49 minutes remaining. Around him, the other candidates were still buried in their calculations, foreheads creased with concentration hands, moving frantically across pages of scratch paper. Jennifer Walsh from MIT was working through a complex series of equations, her approach textbook perfect but slow. Thomas Reeves from Harvard had filled 3 pages with calculations and was starting on a 4th. Derek Chen was erasing something for the 3rd time, his jaw clenched with frustration. Marcus reviewed his solution once more. Clean, elegant, complete. He raised his hand. Sterling looked up from her position at the front of the room. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Mr. Thompson, I'm finished with problem 1. A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Several candidates stopped writing to stare at him. Finished. Sterling walked toward his desk, her heels echoing in the sudden silence. It's been 11 minutes. Yes, ma'am. She picked up his paper and studied it. Marcus watched her eyes move across his work, following the logic, checking each step. Her expression remained neutral, but he saw something flicker behind her eyes. Surprise. Maybe even a trace of fear. This is correct, she said finally. Her voice was carefully controlled. Please proceed to problem 2. The second problem appeared on Marcus's screen. This one was harder a proof involving prime number distribution that required both creativity and technical precision. The kind of problem that separated good mathematicians from exceptional ones. Marcus read it twice. Then he began to write. 23 minutes later, he raised his hand again. Finished. This time, Sterling didn't walk over. She stared at him from across the room, her face unreadable. Proceed to problem 3, Mr. Thompson. The final problem was a monster. Marcus recognized it immediately, a variant of an unsolved conjecture that had stumped mathematicians for decades. The competition version had been modified to be solvable, but barely. This was the kind of problem that required not just knowledge, but intuition. The ability to see patterns that others missed. Marcus closed his eyes. He thought about Linda sleeping at home, fighting her own battle against an enemy she couldn't see. He thought about the bills on the kitchen table, the weight of responsibility that had shaped his life for so long. He thought about the young man he used to be, brilliant and ambitious, before life had taught him that some dreams were too expensive to keep. Then he opened his eyes and began to solve the problem. It took him 31 minutes. When he finished, he had 12 minutes to spare. I'm done, he said quietly. The room erupted. That's impossible, Derek Chen shouted, jumping to his feet. He's cheating. He has to be cheating. Mr. Chen, sit down. Sterling's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. There will be no accusations without evidence. Evidence? He's a janitor. He finished 3 PhD-level problems in under an hour. That's not talent, that's fraud. I said sit down. Derek dropped back into his chair, his face red with fury. But his eyes never left Marcus, burning with a hatred that had nothing to do with mathematics and everything to do with a worldview being challenged. Sterling collected Marcus's papers. She reviewed them silently for several minutes while the other candidates continued working. When she finally looked up, her expression had changed. The professional mask was cracking. All 3 solutions are correct, she announced. Mr. Thompson advances to the semifinals. More whispers, more stares. Marcus gathered his things and walked toward the door. Mr. Thompson? He turned. Sterling was watching him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. My office, after the round ends. We need to talk. It wasn't a request. 2 hours later, Marcus sat across from Sterling in her corner office. The walls were covered with diplomas and awards. Harvard, MIT, Cambridge, the physical evidence of a life dedicated to intellectual achievement. Through the window, students walked across the manicured campus, oblivious to the confrontation taking place above them. Who are you? Sterling asked. She was standing by the window, her arms crossed, her back to him. I told you, I'm the night janitor. Stop. She spun around. Stop pretending. Stop hiding. I've been in mathematics my entire adult life. I know what genius looks like, and I saw it today. The way you approach those problems, the elegance, the intuition, the sheer speed that doesn't come from nowhere. That comes from years of training at the highest level." Marcus was silent. "I pulled your employment records," Sterling continued. "Marcus James Thompson, hired 15 years ago. No college degree listed, no academic history, nothing but a high school diploma from a public school in Detroit. But that's not the whole story, is it? Does it matter? It matters to me." Sterling sat down across from him. "I've been thinking about what you said in the supply closet. About people like me not seeing people like you. About being invisible. And I realized something." "What's that?" "I don't want to be the person who overlooked you. I don't want to be the professor who dismissed a genius because he was holding a mop. But I also need to understand what I'm dealing with here." She leaned forward. "The semifinals are in 1 week. You'll be competing against candidates who have spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. Harvard, MIT, Stanford, the best young mathematicians in the country." "I know." "And you think you can beat them?" Marcus met her eyes. "I think I can try." "That's not good enough." Sterling stood and walked to her bookshelf. She pulled down a thick volume, her own doctoral dissertation bound in leather. "This competition isn't about trying, it's about winning. And winning requires more than raw talent. It requires preparation strategy and the ability to perform under pressure that most people can't imagine." She dropped the dissertation on the desk between them. "This is my doctoral thesis. The research took me 4 years. The final problem, the one I built my entire academic career on, is in Chapter 7. I want you to solve it." Marcus looked at the book. "Why?" "Because if you can solve it, I'll know you're not a fluke. I'll know you actually have a chance in the semifinals." She paused. "And because I need to understand what I'm up against." "You're not up against me, Professor. We're on the same side." "Are we?" Sterling's voice hardened. "Let me be clear about something, Mr. Thompson. I brought you into this competition because I thought it was the right thing to do. But I'm still the head judge. My reputation is on the line. If you embarrass yourself in the semifinals, it reflects on me, on my judgment, on everything I've built. So this is about protecting yourself. This is about knowing what's real and what's wishful thinking." Sterling pointed at the dissertation. "Solve that problem. Prove to me that the preliminary round wasn't a fluke. Then we'll talk about the semifinals." Marcus picked up the dissertation. It was heavy in his hands, the weight of someone else's life's work. "How long do I have?" 1 week. The same amount of time it took me to solve it when I was a graduate student with unlimited resources and a team of advisors." "And you think I can do it in a week while working 3 jobs? I think if you can't, you have no business being in this competition." Marcus stood. The dismissal was clear. "One more thing," Sterling said as he reached the door. He turned. "Derek Chen has been asking questions about you, digging into your background. He's convinced you're hiding something, and he won't stop until he finds it. Let him dig. He won't find anything." "Everyone has something to find, Mr. Thompson. Everyone has secrets. The question is whether yours will destroy you before the competition ends." Marcus walked out without responding. But as he made his way down the hallway past the portraits of distinguished faculty members and the displays of academic achievement, he felt the weight of his past pressing against his chest like a stone. Sterling was right. Everyone had secrets, and his were bigger than she could possibly imagine. That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with Sterling's dissertation open in front of him. Linda was asleep in the next room, her breathing shallow but steady. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Chapter 7. The problem that had made Katherine Sterling's career. Marcus read through it, slowly absorbing the mathematical framework, understanding the question being asked. It was elegant work. He could see why it had earned her a PhD and a tenure-track position, but it was also limited. Sterling had approached the problem from a single angle, missing the deeper structure that connected it to other areas of mathematics. He pulled out his old notebook, the one from his previous life, and began to work. The hours slipped away. Midnight became 1 o'clock, then 2, then 3. Marcus filled page after page with calculations exploring pathways that Sterling's dissertation had never considered. The problem was like a puzzle box with multiple locks, and Sterling had only found one key. But there were others. By 4 in the morning, he had the answer. Not just the answer, a better answer. A more elegant solution that revealed the problem's connection to number theory, topology, and algebraic geometry all at once. Sterling's original proof was like a hammer. His was like a scalpel. Marcus set down his pencil and stared at what he had created. For the first time in 27 years, he felt like himself again. "You've been up all night." He looked up. Linda was standing in the doorway, wrapped in her bathrobe, her face pale in the early morning light. "I couldn't sleep." She walked over and looked at the pages spread across the table. "Is this for the competition?" "Sort of. It's a test. The professor wants to see if I'm real." "Are you?" Marcus laughed softly. "I'm starting to wonder." Linda sat down across from him. "Tell me about before. Tell me about who you were." It was a request she had made many times over the years. And every time Marcus had deflected, changed the subject, found reasons to keep his past buried. But tonight felt different. Tonight, with the mathematics still fresh in his mind, and the competition looming ahead, he felt ready to open doors he had kept locked for decades. "I was 26 years old," he began. "Graduate student at MIT, 3rd year of my doctoral program. They said I was one of the most promising mathematicians of my generation." "What happened?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The memories were painful, like touching a wound that had never fully healed. "My father got sick. Lung cancer. He'd worked in the auto plants his whole life, breathed in chemicals they told him were safe. By the time they diagnosed him, it was too late." "I'm sorry, baby." He didn't have insurance, not real insurance, the kind that covers experimental treatments and extended hospital stays. So I left school, took a job at a factory to help pay his bills, then another job, then another. Marcus's voice dropped. "He died anyway, 6 months later, and by then I'd been out of academia too long. My funding was gone. My advisor had moved on. The door was closed." Linda reached across the table and took his hand. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I was ashamed. Because I felt like a failure. Because every time I thought about what I could have been, it hurt too much to put into words." He looked down at the pages of equations. "I told myself I was making a choice, providing for my family, being responsible. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid to try again and fail. Afraid to prove that maybe I wasn't as special as everyone thought I was. And now..." Marcus looked at his wife, the woman who had stayed with him through poverty and struggle, through midnight shifts and empty bank accounts, through everything life had thrown at them. "Now I'm 53 years old. I've got nothing left to lose and everything to prove." He squeezed her hand. "I'm going to win this competition, Linda. Not for the money, not for the recognition. For us, for everything we've sacrificed, for every dream we put on hold so we could survive." Linda smiled through tears. "Then you better get some sleep. You can't conquer the mathematical world running on empty." "Yes, ma'am." He helped her back to bed, then lay down beside her in the darkness. Sleep came quickly, and for the first time in years, Marcus Thompson dreamed of numbers. The next morning, Marcus delivered Sterling's dissertation to her office with a manila envelope containing his solution. He didn't wait for a response. He had floors to mop and toilets to clean, and the world didn't stop turning just because he had solved a PhD-level problem overnight. But Sterling found him anyway. She tracked him down in the basement of the library where he was restocking paper towels in the men's bathroom. This solution. She was holding his papers, her hands trembling slightly. "This approach. Where did you learn this?" "I figured it out last night." Last night. This methodology connects 4 different branches of mathematics. It takes most researchers years to develop this kind of cross-disciplinary intuition. Marcus shrugged. I've had a lot of time to think while pushing a mop. Sterling stared at him. The arrogance was gone from her face, replaced by something he couldn't quite identify. Wonder, maybe, or fear. You're going to win this competition, she said quietly. You don't know that. Yes, I do. I've been judging mathematical talent for 15 years. I know what excellence looks like, and what you've done here. She held up the papers. This isn't just excellence, this is genius, the kind that comes along once in a generation. Then why do you look so worried? Sterling was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, vulnerable. Because genius makes people dangerous. It threatens the established order. It challenges everyone who has built their career on being the smartest person in the room. She met his eyes, including me. I'm not trying to threaten anyone, Professor. I just want to compete. I know, but that's not how the world works. Sterling lowered her voice. Derek Chen has been talking to university administrators. He's claiming the competition is being compromised by allowing unqualified participants. He wants you disqualified on the grounds of academic fraud. Fraud? I haven't done anything fraudulent. He doesn't need proof. He just needs doubt. If he can convince enough people that something isn't right about you, the university might pull your registration just to avoid controversy. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. So what do I do? You prepare, you practice. And when the semifinals come, you perform so brilliantly that no one can question whether you belong. Sterling tucked his solution into her bag. I'll handle Derek for now. But Marcus, be careful. There are people in this institution who would rather see you fail than admit they were wrong about you. She walked away, leaving Marcus alone with his paper towels and the growing realization that the competition had already begun and the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. The days blurred together. Work, study, sleep. Work, study, sleep. Marcus carved out hours wherever he could find them. Lunch breaks spent reviewing topology night shifts, punctuated by problem sets, worked on scraps of paper, early mornings, solving equations before the sun came up. Linda watched him with a mixture of pride and concern. You're going to burn out before you even get there. I'll rest after the competition. You need to rest now. Your body isn't 26 anymore. Neither is my mind, but it remembers more than I thought. The mathematics was coming back faster than he had expected. Years of dormancy hadn't erased the neural pathways, they had only covered them in dust. And now, brushed clean by practice and determination, they were firing again with all their original intensity. 3 days before the semifinals, Marcus received a message from Dr. William Chen, the elderly professor emeritus, who had spoken up for him in the lecture hall. Come to my office. There's something you need to see. Marcus found Dr. Chen in a cramped study filled with books and papers and the accumulated wisdom of a 60-year academic career. The old man was sitting behind his desk, a thick folder open in front of him. Close the door, Mr. Thompson. Marcus obeyed. I've been doing some research of my own. Dr. Chen tapped the folder. About your past. About the young man you used to be. Marcus felt his stomach drop. I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, I found your old MIT records, your graduate transcripts, your publication history. The professor looked up, his eyes sharp despite his age. Marcus James Thompson, admitted to MIT's doctoral program in 1997 with a full fellowship. Published 2 papers in the Annals of Mathematics before your 28th birthday. Withdrew in 2000 under mysterious circumstances. Marcus said nothing. I also found this. Dr. Chen pulled out a yellowed newspaper clipping. Detroit Free Press, March 2000. Local man abandons promising academic career to care for dying father. It's a small article buried in the back pages, but it tells the story clearly enough. Why are you showing me this? Because Derek Chen is about to find the same information, and when he does, he's going to use it against you. Marcus frowned. How? It's not a secret that I left graduate school. It's not a crime. No, but it raises questions. Why didn't you return to academia after your father died? Why did you spend 27 years working menial jobs when you clearly had the talent for something more? Derek will spin those questions into a narrative of instability, mental illness, unreliability. Dr. Chen leaned forward. He'll argue that someone who abandoned a promising career once will abandon it again. That you're a risk the university can't afford to take. That's not fair. Fair has nothing to do with it. This is about power. About people who would rather tear you down than admit you're better than them. The old professor's voice softened. I've seen it happen before. Brilliant minds destroyed by jealousy and institutional politics. I don't want to see it happen to you. So what do I do? You control the narrative. Dr. Chen pushed the folder across the desk. Tell your story before Derek tells it for you. Be honest about your past. Explain why you left, why you stayed away, why you're coming back now. People respect authenticity. They're suspicious of secrets. Marcus picked up the folder. His own history reduced to paper and ink. And if it doesn't work, if they disqualify me anyway. Dr. Chen smiled sadly. Then at least you'll have told the truth, and that's worth more than any competition. Marcus walked home that night with the folder under his arm, and 27 years of silence pressing against his throat. The old professor was right. Secrets were dangerous. They grew in darkness, feeding on fear and shame, until they became monsters too large to contain. Maybe it was time to let the light in. Maybe it was time to finally tell the world who Marcus Thompson really was. The morning of the semifinals arrived with the kind of cold clarity that made everything feel sharper, more dangerous. Marcus had been awake since 4, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at equations that swam before his exhausted eyes. Linda found him there when she woke up. She didn't say anything. She just made coffee, set a cup in front of him, and sat down across the table. You're going to be amazing, she said. I'm going to try. That's not what I said. She reached over and closed the notebook in front of him. Marcus, look at me. He looked up. Her eyes were fierce despite the illness that had hollowed out her cheeks. You are not the same man who walked away from MIT 27 years ago. You're stronger. You're wiser. You've lived a life that those kids in that competition can't even imagine. They've spent their whole existence in classrooms and libraries. You've spent yours in the real world fighting for everything you have. She squeezed his hand. That's not a weakness. That's your greatest advantage. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. The fear didn't disappear, but it shrank just enough to let him breathe. What if I fail? Then you fail, and you come home, and we figure out the next thing together, like we always have. Linda smiled. But you're not going to fail. I've been married to you for 31 years. I know what you're capable of, even when you don't. He leaned across the table and kissed her. I love you. I love you too. Now go show those Ivy League snobs what a Detroit boy can do. The competition hall was packed when Marcus arrived. Over 200 spectators filled the seats. Faculty members, students, journalists, and a surprising number of people who had followed the story online. The Janitor Genius hashtag had gone viral, and the semifinals had become something more than an academic competition. It had become a symbol. 6 candidates remained. Jennifer Walsh from MIT, Thomas Reeves from Harvard, Derek Chen from Whitmore, Sarah Morrison from Stanford, Michael Park from Berkeley, and Marcus Thompson listed simply as independent. Sterling stood at the podium, her face a careful mask of professional neutrality. But when her eyes met Marcus's across the room, he saw something there. Warning, concern, maybe even fear. Welcome to the semifinals of the 87th Annual Euler Challenge, she announced. Today's format will test not only your mathematical knowledge, but your ability to think creatively under pressure. Each candidate will face 3 problems of increasing difficulty. You will have 90 minutes total. Those who complete all 3 problems correctly will advance to the championship round. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the candidates. Let me be clear about what we're looking for. This competition isn't about speed or memorization. It's about demonstrating genuine mathematical insight, the ability to see connections that others miss to find elegant solutions to complex problems. The judges will be evaluating not just correctness, but creativity, rigor, and depth of understanding. Marcus felt Derek's eyes boring into him from across the room. The younger man had been quiet since Dr. Chen's warning, but that silence felt more dangerous than his earlier hostility. Quiet enemies were planning something. You may begin. The first problem appeared on the screens in front of each candidate. Marcus read it carefully, his mind automatically breaking it down into component parts. It was a number theory problem. Elegant, challenging, but within reach for anyone with solid fundamentals. He began to work. The 90 minutes that followed were the most intense of Marcus's life. The first problem took him 22 minutes. The second, a complex analysis challenge involving infinite series, took 31. That left him 37 minutes for the final problem. When he saw it, his heart stopped. It was Sterling's doctoral research. The same problem she had given him to solve in private, but modified, twisted, made harder. The familiar structure was there, but the constraints had been tightened. The parameters changed, the solution pathway he had discovered blocked by new conditions. Marcus looked up at Sterling. Her face was pale, her jaw tight. She hadn't done this. Someone else had. His eyes found Derek Chen, who was watching him with a smile that could only be described as triumphant. The younger man had seen Sterling's dissertation. He had recognized the problem Marcus had solved. And he had convinced someone, a faculty ally, a sympathetic administrator, to modify it specifically to neutralize Marcus's advantage. The trap had been sprung. Around him, the other candidates were working steadily through their own final problems. Jennifer Walsh was writing confidently, her MIT training serving her well. Thomas Reeves had filled half his whiteboard with careful calculations. Even Derek, despite his scheming, was making progress on his own challenge. Marcus stared at the modified problem, feeling the walls close in. Everything he had prepared, everything he had discovered in his late-night study sessions was useless now. The elegant solution that had impressed Sterling was locked behind conditions that made it inapplicable. 20 minutes left. He could feel the audience watching him. The cameras streaming to thousands of viewers online. The weight of expectations, his own, Linda's, everyone who had ever been underestimated and overlooked. 15 minutes. His whiteboard was nearly empty. A few tentative scratches, quickly abandoned. The mathematics that had flowed so easily before was now blocked, dammed up behind a wall of modified constraints. Sterling's voice cut through his panic. 10 minutes remaining. Derek had finished. He set down his chalk with a flourish, turning to watch Marcus struggle with unconcealed satisfaction. The other candidates were in various stages of completion, some finished, some still working, but none as visibly lost as Marcus. This is it, he thought. This is where the story ends. The janitor, who thought he could compete with Harvard and MIT, humiliated in front of the world. He closed his eyes. And in the darkness behind his eyelids, something shifted. It was a memory. Not from his MIT days, but from earlier. Much earlier. High school. A public school in Detroit with leaking roofs and outdated textbooks. A mathematics teacher named Mr. Robertson, who had stayed after class to work with the quiet kid, who seemed to understand numbers in ways the other students didn't. Marcus? Mr. Robertson had said one day, "The most important thing about mathematics isn't the formulas. It's the way you think. Anyone can memorize techniques, but the great mathematicians, the ones who change the world, they see the underlying structure. They find the simple truth hiding inside the complex problem." The simple truth. Marcus opened his eyes. He had been approaching the modified problem the same way he had approached the original, looking for elegant, sophisticated solutions that leveraged advanced techniques. But the modifications had blocked those pathways precisely because they were predictable. Whoever had designed this trap had anticipated that approach. What if the answer wasn't complex at all? What if the modifications, rather than making the problem harder, had actually created a simpler solution that no one had thought to look for? 7 minutes left. Marcus picked up his chalk. His hand was trembling, but his mind was suddenly clear. He didn't try to work around the new constraints. Instead, he embraced them. He let them guide him toward a different approach entirely, not the sophisticated cross-disciplinary methodology he had developed, but something more fundamental, more basic, more beautiful. The equations flowed from his hand like water finding its natural course. Each line built on the last, following a logic that felt almost inevitable. The modifications that had seemed like obstacles became signposts pointing toward a solution that was hiding in plain sight. 3 minutes. Marcus stepped back from his whiteboard. The solution was complete. It wasn't the answer he had expected to find. It wasn't anything like the elegant proof he had submitted to Sterling days earlier. But it was correct. He could feel it in his bones. "Time," Sterling announced. The room exhaled. Judges moved among the candidates, collecting papers and examining whiteboards. Marcus watched them approach his station, their faces unreadable. Dr. William Chen was among them, his old eyes scanning Marcus's work with careful attention. The verification took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of whispered consultations, rechecking calculations, comparing approaches. The audience grew restless. The online stream chat exploded with speculation. Finally, Sterling returned to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have our results." The room went silent. Advancing to the championship round, Jennifer Walsh from MIT. Applause. Thomas Reeves from Harvard. More applause. And Marcus Thompson, Independent. The room erupted. Not just applause, but cheers, shouts, the release of tension that had been building for hours. Marcus stood frozen at his whiteboard, unable to process what he was hearing. He had done it. Against all odds, against a trap specifically designed to destroy him, he had found a way through. Derek Chen's face was a mask of disbelief that quickly hardened into fury. He stormed toward Sterling, his voice cutting through the celebration. "This is ridiculous. His solution can't possibly be valid. I demand a full review." "The solution has been verified by 3 independent judges, Mr. Chen." "Then the judges are incompetent or compromised." Derek pointed at Marcus. "This man has no credentials, no formal training, no right to be in this competition at all." "Mr. Chen, I'm going to ask you to lower your voice." "I will not lower my voice." Derek's composure was cracking, the polished Harvard exterior giving way to something uglier beneath. "Everyone knows this is a publicity stunt. The university wanted attention, so they let a janitor enter a competition he has no business being in. And now you're pushing him through to the finals because it makes a good story." The room had gone quiet again. Cameras were rolling. Every word was being broadcast to thousands of viewers. Sterling stepped down from the podium and walked toward Derek until they were face to face. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but carried perfectly in the silence. "Mr. Chen, I have been judging mathematical competitions for 15 years. I have evaluated thousands of candidates from every prestigious institution in the world. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that what I witnessed today from Mr. Thompson was not a publicity stunt. It was not luck. It was not fraud." She paused. "It was genius. Genius." Derek laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls. "He's a 53-year-old man who cleans toilets for a living. What could he possibly know about mathematics at this level? More than you, apparently." The words hit like a slap. Derek's face went red. "This isn't over," he said. "I'm filing a formal complaint with the university administration. I'm going to expose this farce for what it is." "File whatever you want, Mr. Chen. But understand this." Sterling's voice dropped even lower. "If you continue to harass Mr. Thompson or attempt to undermine this competition, I will personally ensure that every graduate program in the country knows about your behavior today. Your academic career will be over before it begins." Derek stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away, pushing through the crowd toward the exit. Sterling watched him go, then turned to face the room. The championship round will take place in 1 week. 3 candidates remain. May the best mathematician win. The reception afterward was a blur of congratulations and questions. Journalists wanted interviews. Faculty members wanted to shake his hand. Students who had ignored him for years suddenly wanted to know his story. Marcus escaped as soon as he could, slipping out a side door into the cool evening air. His phone was buzzing with messages Dr. Chen colleagues from his night shift who had watched the stream on their phones during breaks. He found a bench near the edge of campus and sat down, letting the silence wash over him. "You did well today." He looked up. Sterling was standing a few feet away, her arms crossed against the cold. "You modified the problem," Marcus said. "The final one. You changed it from what you gave me before." "I didn't. Someone else did." "Derek." Sterling nodded slowly. "He has allies on the faculty. People who share his belief that this competition is being corrupted by allowing unqualified candidates to participate." She sat down on the bench beside him. "I tried to stop them, but I found out too late. By the time I saw the modified problem, it was already locked in." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know what you're up against." Sterling turned to face him. "Derek Chen is not going to stop. He's going to dig into your past, find whatever he can find, and use it to destroy you. And he has a week to do it." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Then I guess I should tell you the truth before he does." "The truth about what?" "About who I am. About who I was." He took a deep breath. "My name is Marcus James Thompson. 27 years ago, I was a third-year doctoral student at MIT. I was on track to become one of the leading mathematicians of my generation. I had published 2 papers in the Annals of Mathematics. I had a full fellowship and a faculty advisor who believed I was going to change the field." Sterling's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't interrupt. "Then my father got sick. Lung cancer from years of working in the auto plants. He didn't have insurance, not the kind that covers experimental treatments and extended hospital stays. So I left school. I told myself it was temporary, that I would go back once he recovered." Marcus's voice caught. "He didn't recover. He died 6 months later, and by then everything had fallen apart. My funding was gone. My advisor had moved on. The door was closed." "Why didn't you try to go back later?" "Fear, shame. The longer I stayed away, the harder it became to imagine returning. I convinced myself that I had made my choice, that this was my life, now that mathematics was something that belonged to my past." He laughed bitterly. "For 27 years I've been hiding who I really am. From the world, from my wife, even from myself." Sterling was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, softer. "I judged you. That night in the lecture hall when I told you to get out, I looked at you and saw everything I was afraid of becoming ordinary, invisible, forgotten. And instead of recognizing your brilliance, I attacked you. You couldn't have known. I should have. The way you looked at that equation there was understanding in your eyes. Real understanding. Not curiosity, not confusion, but the kind of recognition that only comes from deep familiarity." She shook her head. "I was so certain that intelligence came from credentials and pedigree that I couldn't see it standing right in front of me in a janitor's uniform." Marcus looked at her. The arrogant professor he had met weeks ago seemed far away, now replaced by someone more complicated, more human. "Why does this competition matter so much to you?" he asked. Sterling was quiet for a long time before answering. "Because I forgot why I became a mathematician in the first place. Somewhere along the way, I stopped caring about the beauty of numbers and started caring about the prestige, the publications, the awards, the corner office." She looked out at the darkening campus. "When I was young, mathematics was magic. It was this incredible language that could describe the universe. Every equation was a poem. Every proof was a story. But now it's just politics. Politics and ego and protecting my territory. Sterling turned back to him. When you solved that problem today, the modified one, the trap that was designed to destroy you, I felt something I haven't felt in years. Excitement. Real excitement. Watching you find that solution was like watching someone discover fire. It wasn't that impressive. Yes, it was. You were backed into a corner with no way out, and instead of giving up, you found a door that no one else could see. That's not something you learn in graduate school. That's instinct. That's gift. She paused. That's the kind of mathematics I fell in love with when I was 19 years old. They sat in silence as the last light faded from the sky. Students walked past in groups, their voices and laughter drifting across the quad. Somewhere in the distance, a clock tower chimed the hour. "The championship round," Marcus said finally. "What should I expect?" Sterling's expression hardened. "Expect the hardest thing you've ever faced. 3 candidates, 1 problem. The kind of challenge that separates the good from the exceptional." She met his eyes. "I designed it myself years ago. It's the problem I've always wanted to see solved, something that has haunted me since my doctoral research. I've never shown it to anyone, which means no one can be specifically prepared for it. It will test everything you have. And if I can't solve it, then Jennifer Walsh or Thomas Reeves will take the prize and everyone will say that's how it was always supposed to be." Sterling stood. "But if you can solve it, if you can find the answer that has eluded me for 20 years, then the world will have to acknowledge what I've already seen. That genius doesn't care about credentials or circumstances. That brilliance can survive 27 years in the darkness and still shine brighter than anyone expects." She started to walk away, then stopped. "For what it's worth, Mr. Thompson, I hope you win. Not because of the publicity or the story it will tell, but because you deserve it. And because it would prove that sometimes the universe actually gets things right." She disappeared into the darkness, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the weight of the week ahead. That night, he sat with Linda and told her everything. The modified problem, the trap, Derek's threats, Sterling's warning. "So what are you going to do?" Linda asked when he finished. "I'm going to win." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." He took her hands. "I've spent 27 years running from who I am. I'm done running. Whatever happens in that championship round, I'm going to face it as myself." Marcus Thompson, the janitor who used to be a mathematician, the husband who would do anything for his wife, the man who refuses to be invisible anymore. Linda smiled through tears. "That's the man I married." "That's the man I forgot how to be." He kissed her forehead. "Thank you for never giving up on him. Never, not for a second, not ever." Marcus spent the next week preparing with an intensity he hadn't felt in decades. Every spare moment was dedicated to mathematics, reviewing advanced concepts, working through practice problems, pushing his mind to its absolute limits. But he also spent time doing something else. He wrote a letter. A long, detailed account of his life, the MIT years, his father's illness, his decision to leave the decades of silence and hiding. He addressed it to the university's board of directors. Dr. Chen had been right. The only way to survive Derek's coming attack was to control the narrative, to tell his own story before someone else told it for him. He sent the letter on Monday morning. By Monday evening, it had leaked to the press. By Tuesday, Marcus Thompson was no longer just the janitor who had challenged a Harvard professor. He was a symbol of second chances, of hidden potential, of the dreams that get buried by life, and sometimes, if we're lucky, get dug up again. The story spread across social media, picked up by news outlets across the country. People who had never cared about mathematics suddenly cared about this competition. Letters poured in from all over, from factory workers and nurses and teachers and janitors, from everyone who had ever been underestimated and overlooked. Derek's planned exposé collapsed before it could launch. There was nothing to expose anymore. The truth was already out there, And instead of destroying Marcus, it had made him legendary. The championship round was set for Saturday. 3 candidates, 1 problem. And the eyes of the world watching to see if a 53-year-old janitor could complete the most improbable comeback in academic history. Saturday came faster than Marcus expected. He woke at 3 in the morning, unable to sleep. Linda was breathing softly beside him, her hand resting on his arm, even in unconsciousness. He lay there for a while, watching the shadows on the ceiling, feeling the weight of what was coming. At 4, he gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen. He made coffee and sat at the table where he had solved Sterling's dissertation problem weeks ago. The same table where he had studied mathematics as a young man before life had intervened. The same table where he had paid bills and worried about money and tried to hold his family together through decades of struggle. Today, one way or another, everything would change. His phone buzzed, a text from Dr. William Chen. "Whatever happens today, you've already won something important. You've reminded all of us why we fell in love with mathematics in the first place. Good luck, Marcus." He stared at the message for a long time. Then he got up, took a shower, and put on the only suit he owned, a dark blue one that Linda had bought him for their 25th anniversary. It was slightly too tight now, the fabric straining at the shoulders, but it would have to do. When he came out of the bedroom, Linda was awake and sitting in the living room. She was dressed, which surprised him. She rarely had the energy for clothes these days. "What are you doing up? You think I'm going to miss this?" She smiled, but he could see the effort it cost her. "I'm coming with you." "Linda, you're not strong enough." "I'm strong enough for this." She stood slowly, steadying herself against the arm of the chair. "I've watched you work 3 jobs for 15 years. I've watched you study mathematics in stolen moments, hiding textbooks like they were contraband. I've watched you pretend to be less than you are, because the world told you that's all you could be." Her voice cracked. "I'm not missing this, Marcus. Not for anything." He crossed the room and held her. She felt fragile in his arms, lighter than she should be, but her grip was fierce. "I love you," he said. "I know. Now let's go show them what you're made of." The competition hall was transformed. Where hundreds had gathered for the semifinals, thousands now filled the space. News cameras lined the walls. International press credentials hung from lanyards around the necks of journalists from a dozen countries. The story of the janitor mathematician had captured something in the global imagination, and everyone wanted to see how it ended. Marcus helped Linda to a seat in the front row, reserved for families of the finalists. She squeezed his hand one last time. "Go get them, baby." He walked to the candidates area where Jennifer Walsh and Thomas Reeves were already waiting. Jennifer looked nervous, her MIT confidence finally showing cracks. Thomas was calm but pale. His Harvard pedigree no protection against the pressure of the moment. They nodded at Marcus as he took his place. Whatever rivalry had existed between them seemed to have faded. They were all in this together now, 3 mathematicians facing the same impossible challenge. Sterling took the podium. She was wearing a simple black dress, her usual designer flash replaced by something more somber. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that Marcus hadn't heard before. "Welcome to the championship round of the 87th Annual Euler Challenge. What you will witness today is the culmination of a competition that has tested the limits of mathematical ability. 3 candidates remain. 1 problem awaits them. The stakes are simple: $50,000 automatic PhD admission to any participating university and a place in mathematical history." She paused, her eyes finding Marcus in the crowd. "But before we begin, I want to say something that isn't in my prepared remarks. Something personal." The audience stirred. This was unusual. Sterling was known for her rigid adherence to protocol. 23 years ago, I sat where these candidates are sitting now. I was a young woman from a working-class family, convinced that I had to be perfect to belong in the academic world. I believed that intelligence was measured by credentials, that brilliance required the right pedigree, that people like me had to work twice as hard to be considered half as good. Her voice wavered slightly. I won that competition. And in winning, I forgot something important. I forgot that mathematics isn't about proving you're smarter than everyone else. It's about discovering truth. It's about seeing beauty in the structure of the universe. It's about the joy of understanding something that seemed impossible to understand. She looked directly at Marcus now. This competition has reminded me of that. Watching someone who has every reason to give up refuse to stop fighting, watching brilliance emerge from the most unexpected place has changed something in me. Whatever happens today, I want the candidates to know that they have already achieved something remarkable. They have reminded us all why mathematics matters. The audience was silent. Even the cameras seemed to hold still. Sterling cleared her throat and returned to her formal tone. The championship problem will appear on the screen behind me. Candidates will have 2 hours to produce a solution. You may use any mathematical methods you choose. The judges will evaluate correctness, elegance, and depth of insight. She took a breath. Let us begin. The screen flickered to life. Marcus read the problem, and his blood went cold. It was a monster. A beast of mathematical complexity that seemed designed not to be solved, but to break whoever attempted it. The problem involved dynamical systems, number theory, and topology, all woven together into something that looked less like a mathematics challenge and more like a nightmare given form. He glanced at Jennifer and Thomas. Their faces had gone white. Whatever they had expected, it wasn't this. 2 hours. One problem. And stakes that would determine the rest of his life. Marcus picked up his chalk and walked to his whiteboard. His hand was trembling. The equations seemed to swim before his eyes, refusing to coalesce into anything meaningful. For the first 30 minutes, he made no progress. He tried approach after approach, each one collapsing under the weight of the problem's complexity. The other candidates were struggling too. Jennifer had filled her board with calculations that led nowhere, and Thomas was erasing more than he was writing. The audience grew restless. The cameras zoomed in on the candidates' faces, capturing every moment of struggle and frustration. Marcus closed his eyes. He tried to remember what Sterling had said about the problem, that it had haunted her for 20 years, that it represented something she had always wanted to see solved. What was it about this challenge that made it so important to her? He opened his eyes and looked at the problem again. Not at the details this time, but at the structure, the shape of the question itself. And suddenly he saw it. The problem wasn't 3 different challenges woven together. It was one challenge viewed from 3 different angles. The dynamical systems, the number theory, the topology, they were all describing the same underlying mathematical object. Sterling hadn't designed a complex problem. She had designed a unified one, hiding its simplicity behind apparent complexity. Marcus began to write. The equations flowed differently now. Instead of fighting against the problem's structure, he worked with it. He let the different mathematical perspectives guide him toward their common center, building bridges between fields that seemed unrelated. 90 minutes left. His whiteboard was filling up. Jennifer had stopped working. She was staring at her board with the blank expression of someone who had run out of ideas. Thomas was still writing, but his approach was mechanical, desperate. He was trying every technique he knew, hoping something would stick. Marcus kept working. The solution was emerging like a photograph, developing in chemical bath slowly, then all at once. Each step revealed the next. Each equation opened a door to the one that followed. 1 hour left. The audience was leaning forward in their seats. The cameras had stopped cycling between candidates and fixed on Marcus's whiteboard. He was close now. So close he could taste it. The final step was just out of reach, hidden behind a transformation he couldn't quite see. 45 minutes. Marcus stepped back from his board. He stared at his work, trying to find the missing piece. Everything was there, the analysis, the structure, the connections between fields. But the final step, the one that would bring it all together, remained elusive. He thought about his father, about the man who had worked in auto plants his whole life, breathing in chemicals that would eventually kill him, about the sacrifices that had been made so Marcus could have a chance at something more. He thought about Linda, about the woman who had stood by him through decades of struggle, who had never once made him feel ashamed of the life they had built together, who was sitting in the front row right now watching him fight for something that mattered. He thought about Mr. Robertson, his high school mathematics teacher, about the simple truth hiding inside the complex problem. And then, like a light switching on in a dark room, he saw it. The final step wasn't complex at all. It was elegant, beautiful, the kind of solution that made you laugh when you discovered it because it was so obvious in retrospect. Marcus picked up his chalk and wrote the last 3 lines. When he stepped back, the solution was complete. 23 minutes remained on the clock. The audience erupted. People were on their feet cheering, applauding, crying. Marcus stood before his whiteboard, chalk dust on his fingers, feeling something he hadn't felt in 27 years. He felt like himself again. Sterling approached with the judging panel. Dr. William Chen was among them, his old eyes bright with tears. They examined Marcus's work in silence, following the logic step by step, verifying each transformation. The examination took 15 minutes. When they finished, Sterling turned to face the audience. Her voice was steady, but Marcus could see her hands shaking. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "we have a winner." The room exploded. Marcus didn't hear the rest of her announcement. He was already moving toward Linda, pushing through the crowd that had surrounded him. She was standing, God knows how she found the strength, her arms open, tears streaming down her face. He held her so tight he was afraid he might hurt her. "You did it," she whispered. "You did it, baby. We did it. We did it together." The celebration that followed was overwhelming. Journalists shouted questions. Cameras flashed. University administrators, who had never given Marcus a second glance, lined up to shake his hand. But the moment that mattered most came later, when the crowd had thinned and Marcus found himself alone with Sterling in a quiet corner of the hall. "That solution," she said, "I've been trying to find it for 20 years. 20 years of my life working on that problem. And you solved it in 2 hours. I had good motivation. You had genius." Sterling's voice was thick with something Marcus couldn't identify. "Do you know why I designed that problem? Why it's haunted me for so long? Tell me." "Because it represents everything I love about mathematics, the way different fields connect. The beauty hiding inside complexity. The moment when understanding breaks through and you see the truth that was always there." She looked at him. "I thought I had lost that. I thought years of academic politics and professional competition had killed it. But watching you solve it today, watching you find the beauty I had given up on, it's like being reminded of why I started this journey in the first place." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised them both. "Have dinner with me." Sterling blinked. "Excuse me." "Not like that. I mean with me and Linda. Come to our house. Have a meal with us. See what real life looks like outside these academic walls." He paused. "I think we both have things to learn from each other. And I think it starts with breaking bread together." Sterling stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she smiled. "I'd like that, Mr. Thompson." "Marcus, call me Marcus." "Marcus." She extended her hand. "And I'm Katherine." They shook hands. It felt like the end of something old and the beginning of something new. But the day wasn't done with its revelations. As Marcus was preparing to leave with Linda, Dr. William Chen approached him with an expression that mixed joy with something else. Urgency, maybe, or anticipation. "Marcus, there's someone here who would like to meet you. Someone who traveled a very long way when she heard about this competition." Marcus frowned. "Who?" Dr. Chen stepped aside, and an elderly woman emerged from behind him. She was small and fragile, with white hair, and eyes that sparkled with fierce intelligence. She looked at Marcus with an expression he couldn't read. "Marcus Thompson," she said. "My God, it really is you." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. He knew that voice. He knew that face, though it had aged 30 years since he had last seen it. "Dr. Rodriguez," he whispered. Elena Rodriguez, his faculty advisor at MIT. The woman who had guided his research, shaped his thinking, believed in his potential when no one else did. The woman he had abandoned without a word when he left to care for his father. "I thought you had died," she said, her voice cracking. "When you disappeared, I looked for you everywhere. I called your family, your friends, everyone I could think of. No one knew where you had gone. I thought something terrible had happened." "I'm sorry," Marcus said. The words felt impossibly inadequate. "I should have contacted you. I should have explained. You just what?" "I was ashamed. I had promised you I would finish my dissertation, that I would make something of the potential you saw in me. And instead, I vanished. I became invisible. I thought you would be disappointed in what I had become." Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward and took his face in her weathered hands. "Marcus James Thompson, listen to me very carefully." Her eyes were fierce despite their age. "You were the most gifted student I ever worked with. Not because of your publications or your test scores, but because you saw mathematics the way it deserves to be seen, as something beautiful and alive. When you disappeared, I didn't lose a promising researcher. I lost a son." Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be here. Be present. Take this second chance and make something extraordinary with it." She smiled through her own tears. "Which you've already started to do, if today is any indication. How did you know I was here? The videos, the hashtags, the janitor mathematician who challenged a professor." She laughed. "I saw the clips of your preliminary round and I knew immediately. I would recognize your mathematical handwriting anywhere. The way you approach a problem, the elegance of your solutions, that's not something you can learn. That's something you're born with." Marcus looked at the woman who had shaped so much of who he was, the mentor he had abandoned, the bridge he had thought was burned forever. "I never forgot what you taught me," he said. "Even when I was mopping floors and emptying trash cans, I never forgot. You gave me something that couldn't be taken away. I gave you nothing. I just helped you see what was already there." Dr. Rodriguez turned to look at Linda, who had been watching the reunion with tears streaming down her face. "And you must be the woman who kept him alive all these years, the one who gave him a reason to keep fighting." Linda nodded, unable to speak. "Thank you," Dr. Rodriguez said simply. "Thank you for protecting him when the rest of us had given up." The four of them stood there in the emptying hall, Marcus, Linda, Dr. Rodriguez, and Katherine Sterling, who had witnessed the reunion from a respectful distance. Four people whose lives had intersected in ways none of them could have predicted. Four people who had, each in their own way, been changed by what had happened. Dr. Chen joined them, his old face wrinkled with satisfaction. "I think this calls for a celebration," he said. "I know a restaurant that serves the best soul food in the city. My treat." Marcus looked at Linda. She was exhausted, he could see it in her eyes, but she was also glowing with a light he hadn't seen in months. "I think my wife could use some good food," he said, "and some good company." "Then let's go." Dr. Chen offered his arm to Dr. Rodriguez. "I believe we have 27 years of catching up to do." They walked out of the competition hall together, leaving behind the cameras and the crowds and the weight of everything that had happened. Tomorrow, there would be interviews and offers and decisions to make about the future. Tomorrow, the world would demand answers about what came next. But tonight, there was only this. A group of people who had found each other against all odds, sharing a meal and sharing stories, celebrating not just a victory, but a homecoming. Marcus Thompson had spent 27 years being invisible. He had spent 27 years hiding from his past, running from his potential, convincing himself that the life he had built was the only life available to him. He had been wrong. The truth was that he had never stopped being a mathematician. The equations had never left his mind, even when he thought he had abandoned them. The gift that Dr. Rodriguez had nurtured that Sterling had challenged that Linda had protected. It had been there all along, waiting for the moment when he would finally have the courage to claim it. At the restaurant, surrounded by laughter and warmth and the faces of people who saw him, truly saw him, Marcus raised his glass. "To second chances," he said. "To second chances," they echoed. And for the first time in 27 years, Marcus Thompson felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The weeks following the championship blurred into a whirlwind that Marcus could barely comprehend. The $50,000 went straight to Linda's medical bills. For the first time in years, they weren't drowning. They weren't rich, far from it, but the weight that had been crushing them for so long finally lifted just enough to let them breathe. The PhD offers came flooding in. Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Princeton. Every prestigious mathematics program in the country wanted Marcus Thompson, the janitor who had solved the unsolvable, the man who had emerged from invisibility to claim a place among the academic elite. But the offer that mattered most came from an unexpected source. Katherine Sterling knocked on his door 3 days after the competition. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater the first time Marcus had seen her out of professional attire. She looked younger somehow, less armored. "I have a proposal," she said. Marcus stepped aside to let her in. Linda was resting in the bedroom, but she called out when she heard Katherine's voice. "Is that Professor Sterling? Tell her to come say hello before you two start talking math." Katherine smiled. It was a real smile, not the calculated one Marcus had seen her wear in lecture halls. "Mrs. Thompson, how are you feeling?" "Better than I have in months." Linda was sitting up in bed, color returning to her cheeks. "Whatever you said to my husband in that competition hall, it lit a fire in him, and fire is contagious." "Your husband lit his own fire. I just stopped trying to put it out." They talked for a few minutes, small talk, the kind that Marcus had never imagined Katherine Sterling capable of. She asked about Linda's treatment, about their children, about the life they had built in their modest house. She listened with genuine interest, and Marcus saw something shifting in her eyes. The professor who had called him a janitor with contempt was becoming someone else entirely. When Linda finally drifted off to sleep, Katherine followed Marcus to the kitchen. He made coffee, and they sat at the same table where he had solved her dissertation problem. The same table where his life had begun to change. "The proposal," Marcus said. "What is it?" Katherine wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since the competition. About who I've become. About the kind of institution I've helped create." She looked up at him. "I'm not proud of the answer." "Most people never ask the question." "That's not an excuse. It's an indictment." She took a breath. "I've spent my entire career believing that excellence could only come from certain places, certain backgrounds, certain pedigrees. I built walls around mathematics and told myself I was protecting standards. But I wasn't protecting anything. I was just keeping people out." Marcus waited. He could see she was working toward something, and he had learned that some things needed time to emerge. "Whitmore University has offered me the position of Dean of Sciences," Katherine continued. "It's a promotion I've been working toward for years. More money, more prestige, more power to shape the department." She paused. "I'm going to turn it down." "Why?" "Because I don't want to spend the rest of my career managing budgets and attending committee meetings. I want to do something that matters." She met his eyes. "I want to create a new program, a scholarship fund that identifies and supports brilliant minds who have been overlooked by traditional academic systems. Not just financial support, mentorship, guidance, everything they need to reach their potential." Marcus felt something stir in his chest. "That's a big change." "It's the right change, and I want you to help me build it." "Me?" "You're not just a symbol, Marcus. You're proof that the system is broken. You're proof that genius can hide in plain sight for decades while we waste it on mopping floors and emptying trash cans. Your story can open doors that have been locked for generations." Katherine leaned forward. Come back to Whitmore. Not as a janitor. Not as a student. As a partner. Help me create something that will matter long after both of us are gone. Marcus stared at her. 3 weeks ago, this woman had tried to humiliate him in front of her students. Now she was offering him a chance to reshape the institution that had dismissed him. What about my PhD? Completed at Whitmore. Dr. Rodriguez has already agreed to supervise your dissertation remotely, and I'll serve as your local advisor. You can finish in 2 years, maybe less, given what you've already accomplished. Katherine smiled. And when you graduate, you'll have a faculty position waiting for you. Not because of charity or publicity, but because you've earned it. Marcus thought about the life he had imagined for himself. The quiet return to academia. The chance to finally pursue the research he had abandoned decades ago. This was bigger than that. This was a chance to change the system itself. I need to talk to Linda, he said. Of course, take all the time you need. Katherine stood. But Marcus, whatever you decide, thank you. For reminding me why I became a mathematician. For showing me that there's still beauty in this field, even when we try our hardest to bury it. She left without waiting for a response. Marcus sat alone in his kitchen, coffee growing cold in his hands, thinking about second chances and the strange ways they sometimes arrive. That night, he told Linda everything. She listened in silence, her hand resting on his. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do? She finally asked. I don't know. Part of me wants to just finish the PhD and disappear into research. Find some quiet corner of academia where I can do mathematics without all the attention. And the other part? Marcus looked at his wife. 31 years of marriage. 31 years of watching her sacrifice her own dreams to support his. 31 years of building a life that was smaller than either of them had imagined, but stronger than most people would ever know. The other part wants to make sure no one else has to wait 27 years for a second chance. Linda smiled. The same smile she had given him on their wedding day. The same smile she had given him when he told her he was entering the competition. Then you already know your answer. Marcus started at Whitmore the following month. Not as a janitor this time, but as a doctoral candidate and founding partner of the Sterling Thompson Scholarship Program. The name had been Katherine's idea, a public acknowledgement of her own transformation and his role in it. The first months were challenging. Marcus had forgotten how demanding academic life could be. The research, the writing, the endless seminars and meetings. It was a different kind of exhaustion than pushing a mop, but exhaustion nonetheless. But there were moments that made it worthwhile. The first scholarship recipient was a single mother named Rosa Martinez, who worked as a cafeteria server at a community college. She had been teaching herself computer science through free online courses, building programs that would have impressed any Silicon Valley engineer. The Sterling Thompson program paid for her degree and provided childcare. Within a year, she had earned a full scholarship to Georgia Tech. The second recipient was James Walker, a 62-year-old prison guard who had been writing poetry in his spare time for decades. His work was raw and powerful, the kind of writing that captured something essential about the human experience. The program funded his MFA and connected him with publishers who recognized his talent. The third was a teenager named David Chen, no relation to Derek, whose family had immigrated from Vietnam when he was 7. He worked nights at his parents' restaurant while maintaining a perfect GPA at an underfunded public school. His mathematics scores were off the charts, but no one had ever told him that people like him could attend elite universities. The Sterling Thompson program changed that. With each new recipient, Marcus felt the walls coming down. The walls he had believed were permanent. The walls Katherine had spent her career building. They were crumbling, and something better was growing in their place. Derek Chen graduated from Whitmore that spring. He left without ceremony, accepting a position at a small college in the Midwest, far from the Ivy League career he had imagined for himself. The scandal of his attempted sabotage had followed him, not because anyone had publicized it, but because the academic world has a long memory. Marcus saw him once on the day he cleaned out his office. Derek was carrying boxes to his car, his face tight with bitterness and defeat. Their eyes met across the parking lot. For a moment, Marcus thought Derek might say something, an apology, an accusation, anything. But the younger man just turned away and kept walking. Marcus let him go. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Some enemies weren't worth hating. Derek Chen had spent his entire life believing that success was a zero-sum game, that every winner created a loser. He had been wrong, and the universe had corrected him in its own time. Dr. Elena Rodriguez visited Whitmore in the fall. She was 83 years old now, her body failing, but her mind still razor-sharp. She spent a week reviewing Marcus's dissertation research, pushing him harder than she had pushed him 30 years ago. "This is good," she said, tapping his manuscript with a wrinkled finger. "But it's not great. You're holding back." "Holding back how?" "You're still afraid. Still worried about what people will think if you really let yourself go. If you really pursue the ideas that keep you up at night." She looked at him with those fierce, intelligent eyes. "Marcus, you've spent 27 years being invisible. It's time to be seen. Not just your work, your vision, your voice, the things you know that nobody else knows." "I'm not sure I know anything that special." "That's a lie, and you know it." Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward. "You solved Katherine's championship problem in 2 hours. A problem she spent 20 years failing to crack. You didn't do that by being ordinary. You did it by seeing something that no one else could see. Now I'm asking you, what else do you see? What other problems are waiting for someone with your particular gift?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. There was a problem he had been thinking about, something he had glimpsed during his late-night study sessions, hidden in the intersection of number theory and topology. A connection that seemed impossible, but felt true. "There's something," he admitted. "But it's crazy. It contradicts established theory." "The best ideas always do." Dr. Rodriguez smiled. "Show me." He showed her. For 3 days, they worked together in Katherine's office, filling whiteboards with equations and arguments. Dr. Rodriguez challenged every assumption, questioned every step, demanded proof for every claim. And at the end of those 3 days, she sat back in her chair and laughed. "Marcus James Thompson, you beautiful, brilliant man, do you have any idea what you found?" "I'm not sure. Is it real?" "It's more than real. It's revolutionary." She shook her head in wonder. "You've just solved a problem that mathematicians have been struggling with for a century. And you did it because you weren't trapped by the same assumptions everyone else was. You saw it fresh. You saw it true." Marcus stared at the whiteboard. The equations stared back at him. "What do I do now?" "Now you write it up. Now you publish. Now you take your place among the greatest mathematical minds in history." Dr. Rodriguez took his hand. "And now you finally stop being afraid of who you are." The paper was published 6 months later. It sent shockwaves through the mathematical community. Marcus Thompson, the janitor mathematician, the man who had been invisible for nearly 3 decades, had solved one of the great unsolved problems in modern mathematics. The awards came after that. Recognition from institutions that had never known his name. Invitations to speak at conferences around the world. A documentary crew that wanted to tell his story. But the moment Marcus treasured most came on a quiet evening in May, when Linda was strong enough to walk with him across the Whitmore campus. Her treatment had been working. The cancer wasn't gone. It might never be completely gone, but it was contained, manageable. She had years ahead of her, maybe decades, instead of the months they had once feared. They walked slowly, arm in arm, past buildings where Marcus had once pushed a cleaning cart. Past lecture halls where students had laughed at him. Past the office where Katherine Sterling had told him to get out. "Do you ever regret it?" Linda asked. "Regret what?" "The years we lost. The life we could have had if things had been different." Marcus thought about the question. He thought about the young man he had been at MIT, brilliant and ambitious, convinced that his destiny was written in mathematical symbols. He thought about the choice he had made when his father got sick, the decades of invisibility that followed. "No," he said finally. "I don't regret it." "Why not?" "Because those years made me who I am. The struggle, the sacrifice, the moments when I thought I would never climb out of the hole I was in, they didn't break me. They forged me." He stopped walking and turned to face his wife. "And they gave me you. They gave me our children. They gave me a life that was harder than I expected, but richer than I ever imagined." Linda's eyes were bright with tears. "You always know the right thing to say." "I've had 31 years of practice." He kissed her forehead. "I love you, Linda Thompson. I loved you when we had nothing. I love you now that the world is finally seeing what you always saw in me." "What I saw in you," she said softly, "was never about mathematics. It was about heart, the size of your heart, the way you never stopped caring, never stopped trying, never stopped believing that good things were possible, even when everything seemed impossible." They stood there in the fading light, two people who had weathered storms that should have destroyed them. Two people who had chosen each other again and again through every hardship and every triumph. "Come on," Marcus said. "There's somewhere I want to take you." He led her to the mathematics building through hallways that echoed with memories. They climbed 3 flights of stairs, Linda gripping the railing, Marcus's hand steady on her back, until they reached a door with a brass nameplate. Dr. Marcus Thompson, Professor of Mathematics, Sterling Thompson Program Director. "They gave you an office." Linda's voice was hushed with wonder. "They gave us an office." Marcus opened the door. "Everything I have, everything I've achieved, it belongs to both of us." The office was small but comfortable. Bookshelves lined the walls filled with mathematics texts and family photographs. A window overlooked the campus where Marcus had once been invisible. A desk held the manuscript of his next paper, the research that would cement his place in mathematical history. But the thing that caught Linda's attention was a framed photograph on the wall. It showed Marcus in his janitor's uniform, mop in hand, standing in front of a blackboard covered in equations. "Where did you get that?" "Katherine found it. It's from a security camera the night I corrected her proof. She had it framed and gave it to me on my first day as faculty." Marcus looked at the image. "She said it should remind me where I came from, and remind everyone else that genius doesn't have a dress code." Linda laughed through her tears. "That woman has changed. We all have. That's the point." There was a knock at the door. Katherine Sterling stood in the hallway dressed casually, her usual professional armor, nowhere to be seen. "Sorry to interrupt. I saw the lights on and wanted to check if you needed anything." "We're fine," Marcus said. "Just showing Linda the office." Katherine smiled at Linda. "Mrs. Thompson, you're looking well." "Feeling well too, thanks to your program. The stress reduction of not worrying about money every minute, it's better medicine than anything the doctors prescribed." "That's what the program is for." Katherine hesitated. "I actually came because I have news. The board approved our expansion proposal. Starting next fall, the Sterling Thompson program will have a presence at 12 universities nationwide. We'll be able to reach hundreds of overlooked scholars instead of dozens." Marcus felt something swell in his chest. Pride, maybe. Or hope. Or the simple satisfaction of knowing that his struggle had meaning beyond himself. "That's incredible news." "It wouldn't have happened without you. Without your story. Without your willingness to be visible." Katherine looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I spent my whole career trying to protect the gates of academia. You taught me that the gates were never worth protecting. The treasures we were guarding were already outside waiting to be let in. You taught yourself that. I just provided an example." "A hell of an example." Katherine turned to leave, then stopped. "Oh, I almost forgot. There's a reception tomorrow night for the new scholarship recipients. Nothing fancy, just dinner at my house. I was hoping you both could come." Marcus looked at Linda. She nodded. "We'll be there." "Good." Katherine smiled. "It wouldn't be complete without you." She walked away, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Linda took Marcus's hand. "She really has changed, hasn't she?" "We all have." Marcus looked out the window at the campus below. Students walked between buildings, their faces illuminated by phone screens, their minds full of dreams they didn't yet know how to pursue. Somewhere among them, he knew, was the next overlooked genius. The next brilliant mind hiding behind a janitor's uniform, or a cafeteria apron, or a security guard badge. "What are you thinking?" Linda asked. "I'm thinking about all the people who are still invisible. All the talent that's being wasted because nobody bothers to look." He turned to face her. "I'm thinking that what we've built here, the program, the scholarships, all of it, it's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's a start. A start is all you need. The rest comes with time." "When did you become so wise?" Linda laughed. "I've always been wise. You were just too busy being a genius to notice." They left the office hand in hand, walking back through the building where Marcus had once been nothing but a shadow. Past the lecture hall where Sterling had humiliated him. Past the janitor's closet where he had hidden his mathematics books. Past all the places that held memories of invisibility and pain. But now, those memories had been transformed. They weren't wounds anymore. They were evidence. Proof that the darkness didn't last forever. Proof that second chances were possible, even when they seemed impossible. The sun was setting over Whitmore University, painting the buildings in shades of gold and orange. Marcus stopped at the edge of campus and looked back at everything he had built, everything he had become. He thought about the night this had all started, the lecture hall, the equation on the blackboard, Sterling's cruel words and his own quiet defiance. "Solve this equation and I'll marry you." She had meant it as an insult, a joke at his expense, a way to put him in his place and keep him there. But Marcus had solved it anyway. Not for her. Not to prove anything to anyone. He had solved it because mathematics was who he was. It was the language his mind spoke, the rhythm his heart beat to the truth that had sustained him through 27 years of invisibility. And in solving it, he had solved something else too. The equation of his own life. The problem of his own potential. The mystery of what happens when you finally stop hiding and start being who you were always meant to be. Linda squeezed his hand. "Ready to go home?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "I'm ready." They walked into the sunset together, leaving behind the campus that had witnessed his lowest moment and his greatest triumph. Tomorrow, there would be more work to do, more students to find, more walls to tear down, more proof that genius didn't care about pedigrees or credentials or the circumstances of your birth. But tonight, there was just this: a man and his wife. A story of perseverance and redemption. A reminder that the most extraordinary things often hide in the most ordinary places. Marcus Thompson had spent 53 years learning a simple truth that being invisible doesn't mean you don't matter. It just means the world hasn't learned to see you yet. And once the world opens its eyes, once it really looks at the people it has overlooked and dismissed and forgotten, that's when everything changes. That's when the equations finally balance. That's when the story becomes complete. 3 years later, Marcus stood at a podium in Stockholm accepting recognition that would have seemed impossible to the young man mopping floors in Detroit. But he wasn't thinking about the award or the audience or the cameras broadcasting his face around the world. He was thinking about Linda sitting in the front row, healthy and strong, her cancer in full remission. He was thinking about Dr. Rodriguez, who had passed away peacefully the previous spring, but not before seeing her student finally fulfill his potential. He was thinking about Katherine Sterling, now his closest colleague, who had traded her corner office for a life of meaning. And he was thinking about all the invisible people watching from break rooms and janitor's closets and hospital night shifts around the globe. The ones who had been told their whole lives that they weren't smart enough, weren't educated enough, weren't worthy enough to matter. He leaned into the microphone. "This award doesn't belong to me," he said. "It belongs to everyone who was ever underestimated, everyone who was ever overlooked, everyone who kept believing in themselves when the world told them to stop." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "If you're watching this from a job that makes you feel invisible, hear me. Your circumstances do not define your potential. Your title does not determine your worth. The world will try to put you in a box, try to tell you who you can and cannot become. Don't listen." Marcus felt the weight of every word. "I spent 27 years believing I was nothing but a janitor. I was wrong. I was always a mathematician. I was always capable of greatness. I just forgot to believe it until someone reminded me that the only person who gets to decide who you are is you." He looked at Linda. She was crying, but she was smiling too. "To everyone who has ever been told they don't belong, you belong. To everyone who has ever been made to feel small, you are not small. To everyone who is still waiting for permission to chase their dreams, this is your permission. Start now. Start today. Start even when you're scared, even when you're tired, even when the world hasn't caught up to who you really are." Marcus straightened his shoulders and spoke the words that would echo around the world. Because genius doesn't wear a uniform. Brilliance doesn't require a pedigree. And the most extraordinary stories are always written by ordinary people who refuse to stay invisible. He stepped back from the podium. The applause thundered through the hall, and somewhere in a break room or a janitor's closet or a hospital night shift, someone who had been told their whole life that they would never amount to anything looked up at the screen and thought, "If he can do it, maybe I can too." That was the real victory. That was the equation finally solved. That was the moment when Marcus Thompson stopped being a story about one man's redemption and became something bigger, a reminder that potential is everywhere, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be believed in, waiting for the courage to emerge from the shadows and claim its rightful place in the light. The janitor had become a legend, but more importantly, he had become proof. Proof that it is never too late. Proof that no one is ever truly invisible. And proof that the only equation that really matters is the one you solve for yourself.